and welcome back to the What the Falk Sunderland Preview Podcast. Sunderland's automatic promotion hopes have all but disappeared after last night's 2-2 draw against Hull City, as we went 5 games, I think it is now, without a win in League One. However, the playoffs are looming, and we do face a visit from John Coleman's Accrington Stanley as we look to get back to winning ways at the Stadium of Light this Saturday. And to join me, discuss the game on Saturday and Stanley's season so far, is Tony from Accrington Stanley podcast Across the Pitch. Tony, how are you doing, mate? Are you all right?
Yeah, I'm well, Graham. All's well here in Toronto. A little bit of snow, but doing well. And how's things at in your neck of the woods?
It's sunny in Scotland, so the world has definitely gone mental. 100%.
Yeah. But we got everything's asked backwards. But anyway, I'm looking forward to talk some football with you about Stanley and the upcoming match.
I think before we begin, obviously you mentioned Toronto there, and I only came across yours and Phil's podcast probably last week or the past fortnight. And as people may have noticed, obviously I think you are from Accrington, but the accent's gone ever so slightly. I love the story of how it came to pass, of how you and Phil actually followed Accrington, but that's a secret that I know. So before we go into the game, just give us a little bit of a lowdown on how Across the Pitch as a podcast sort of came to be and your background following Accrington Stanley.
Well, yeah, you're right. I'm originally from Accrington, but been in Canada for over 50 years or close to 50 years. Yeah, the accent, it does come back when I get to Accrington and a couple of pints in the Crown Pub and then off to the match, and then it does come back. But Phil and his friend Aaron Ayers started a podcast in Phoenix, Arizona, and they were looking for a team to follow in the lower leagues, and the name Accrington Stanley caught their eye, and the logo or the phrase that the club that wouldn't die intrigued them. So they started to do a podcast with some emphasis on that, and they were able to get a player within the first 3 or 4 episodes. I came across it, and obviously I put my comments in and started sort of sending them some information and correction and things like that. And next thing you know, I guess I bothered them enough. They asked me to join the team and worked into being a co-host now. And Phil and I do the player interviews, and we've done coaching staff. And we have another co-host, Darren Woodhead, who's the sort of unofficial historian, I should say, author of Accrington Stanley, written several books on them. And he brings back ex-players and ex-chairmen and people of that nature. And we do a veteran series, which is quite popular with the fans.
And obviously we talked a little bit sort of off air before about sort of your background and stuff like that. I was really quite taken aback because I travel from Scotland, as people know. So that's like about 3 hours for a home match. Obviously we haven't been to a match for a while. And people kind of sometimes commend that and say, oh, you must be mad traveling any sort of distance to follow Sunderland based on the form the past couple of years. And, I say it's a sort of labour of love. And when I spoke to yourself about obviously coming from Toronto, I thought maybe I'd expect you to see, 1 game a year or something like that. But it was far more than that. So just for the people listening, how often do you get to Accrington?
Well, I usually come back at the end of August, beginning of September for about 2 months. And I try to get as many matches as I can there, usually 5 or 6, and maybe a couple of away matches if I can. And I really do enjoy it because no matter what you do watching it on iFollow, and it's just not the same as being in there in person. And as you know, being at the Wham Stadium, it's a very intimate setting, and I call it real football because you can really reach out, touch the players, you can smell the pitch, you can hear the cussing from the managers, and it's just it just brings everything to life. And so I look forward to traveling back. I missed last year, of course, but we concentrated during that time frame to do a lot of player interviews, to bring it to the fans while there was no football. And I'm fingers crossed I can make it back this year.
With the games and stuff you go over now, if I tell you together how much I spend coming from Glasgow, it would probably be more than I'd be happy to admit. But coming from Toronto, I've done the flight sort of, I think it was London to Toronto, 2015, and it wasn't cheap, but How much do you reckon you spend per year then going to see Accrington Stanley from Toronto?
Probably because we're there for 2 months, and if you count my pub money, it's probably about about £10,000, I would think.
And 9,000 of that is on the pub money, right?
Yeah, yeah.
You mentioned the Crown Pub. I love the Crown Pub, by the way. Sunderland fans will know of it because I think it's the one we get into. Cracking match day pub, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's the nice thing about the pubs in and around the stadium, the Grey Horse and the Crown, is that they welcome away fans as well as home fans, and there's never really any issues. I mean, you'll see an Accrington Stanley fan having a pint with an away fan and having a good discussion, and it seems to there's sort of no animosity. It's just everybody's there to enjoy a League One match.
Yeah, no, it's definitely felt like that. And the 2 times I've been down, like I say, the first one got, shall we say, washed away. But it is actually one of my favorite away days because it feels maybe a very, very smaller version, but like growing up at Roker Park and the terracing and stuff like that, which I absolutely love. But regarding the matches being on TV at the moment, I think a lot of people have struggled with the aspect of it, and understandably so. Like you said before, there's something about smelling the pitch, there's something about being near the players, and there's something that makes us want to spend that much amount of money just to get there close to it. But being 7 hours away in a plane and having to watch probably more matches on the TV than you would like, has it made it any easier this season having to watch things on a stream, or is it still just as bad?
Well, it's made it easier because obviously I can watch every match, and it's I think it's harder for people that are season ticket holders in the area that are watching on iFollow because they're normally at the match. But for me, watching on iFollow really for the most of the season is not really that unusual. So it's really easy to adapt to, and in fact, I'm thankful that I can see the games and I get to know the players, and that really translates to when we interview them, that we can actually have some background on their play because we can actually watch them play. I think when they come on, they think, well, what's a guy from Toronto and a guy in Phoenix going to be able to have a decent conversation with me about my play for Accrington Stanley? But with iFollow, it does sort of help us in our research, and I hope it comes across in the podcast.
So before, obviously, the COVID world and iFollow and the ability to where the games had to be streamed because nobody could get in, how would you catch up with Accrington Stanley games before that if you weren't actually there? Was it quite few and far between?
Well, it's funny because I have a fellow friend of mine in Nottingham who actually drives up to see Stanley for most games. But he would phone me before the match with the lineup, and when Accrington scored, he would phone me and phone me at halftime, and then he'd phone me at the end of the match. So I was getting sort of a running commentary from my friend David Davis in Nottingham with updates. He'd phone me on Messenger or WhatsApp and just give me sort of updates, which was so it was a one way of doing it, but you couldn't see the match, so I just kept waiting for him to phone to say that Stanley had scored.
So you kind of, I suppose, waiting almost on the Monday highlights as well, and the whole 5 minutes that you tend to get probably even less so.
and I'd have the text commentary on, but even some of the feeds that you would get, like they follow the BBC text commentary, which always is behind. So I would get phone calls before. Phone calls were better than the text commentary because I was getting information quicker than what the BBC releases.
Yeah, very true, very true. Sort of away from the podcast ever so slightly, and obviously following from such a distance, I think it's been quite a funny season for Accrington, really, hasn't it? I think checking sort of recently, you sit slap bang in the middle of the table in 12th. You've won 17, you've drew 10, and you've lost 15, which is quite literally bang slap in the middle of the table sort of form. How would you sum up Accrington Stanley's season, though? Because I remember you were actually only 2 points behind us with 2 games in hand only about 3 months ago. So how would you sum up the season?
I think on February the 2nd or early part of February, when we were in, I think we got into 5th place, and I think we were a point above you or close in the table. It was that close. The way I would describe the season really is inconsistency. We're always a team that seem to be picked by the pundits for relegation. Which is it's hard on John Coleman and Jimmy Bell because of the job that they have done over the years, and everybody says they punch above their weight. But I think that they're such a good team that they get the best out of players. The big thing, really, as I said, is inconsistency is the injuries that we ran into. Started off with the bout of COVID that went through the team. And that really sort of put us behind the 8 ball with games in hand that we had to catch up. But things started to sort of really turn for me was when we beat Bristol Rovers 6-1. That was really a turning point in a negative way, because after that we really went into win one, lose one, draw one kind of a scenario where you can't really move up the table, and as you can see when you look at the table, somebody like an Oxford or a Blackpool, when they go in a winning streak, they can zoom up the table, and unfortunately we started spinning our wheels, and in fact have started to go backwards a little bit. So yeah, to answer your question, we've been inconsistent, and I think that's been due a lot to injuries as well.
It's quite funny because I was looking at recent form, and I think, to kind of put it into context, I tend to look at the 5 previous games because I think that can tend to be a good marker, but it's really difficult to judge Accrington because you've beaten Doncaster and Oxford and drew away to Blackpool. So there's 3, really good sides. I know Doncaster are on the backwards spiral as well, but they're 3 good sides. But then you've lost 5-1 a 10-man AFC Wimbledon and 3-1 against Rochdale. That's a mixed bag of results. So what's going on recently?
Well, and this is the thing is we seem to be able to play really well and get results against teams in the upper half, the big teams, if you will, and then the teams that we seem to be favored against, for some reason we seem to come out flat, and that's a subject that is really hard to talk to with Coleman, because he's trying to build their confidence up to take on the lower teams. When I say lower teams, I mean in the division, not in quality or anything. Yeah, it's been a real struggle, because when you look at the odds and we're favored to win, it makes me nervous, because that's when we usually pull out a clunker, and we did against MK Dons, and we lost 7-0 to Peterborough.
Yeah.
So we've had a couple of defeats that have been really hard on the mental aspect of the players. But I think one of the turning points for me was when we had Nathan Baxter get injured in a match, and he went off. And also, I believe at the same time, in the same match, we had Keneally get a red card. And that really another turning point in the season, because I don't think we've really recovered from them. Baxter has been a tremendous addition when he came in, and we've had some struggles defensively with injuries and with him being out.
With the was that the AFC Wimbledon game where he got sent off? Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, it was. No, I think it was the Ipswich match. I think.
It was the Ipswich game. Yes, no, you're absolutely right.
And then Ipswich, we were doing okay even with 10 men, and Ipswich scored twice in 5 minutes before the halftime, and that's been a problem with us too, is conceding goals too quickly, either when we scored or B just before halftime or late in the match. I mean, we should have won the match at Blackpool, but Bishop missed a penalty. Might be considered a fair result, but we certainly had a legitimate chance to win that one. And again, against a good Blackpool team that we played really well against.
Yeah, and I think, up until yesterday, Blackpool were on the longest sort of unbeaten streak in a while. And a lot of people's tips for the playoffs, typically, they would, of course, beat us on Saturday, then lose their winning streak a game later. But that's very, very Sunderland, as many people listening will know. Talking about Accrington, Stanley, in terms of stature and stuff like that, I think, and you never want to be arrogant with this in any way, shapes, as a form as a Sunderland fan, because everyone's in the same place. But Accrington, I think, notoriously are probably seen as a side that are, as Andy Holt would probably say, punching above their weight to be in League One anyway. So you see Accrington have been like loitering around sort of those playoff spots occasionally throughout the past few seasons. But being in 12th, when you think of the turnover, the infrastructure and the size of the club is probably a huge positive from an outsider looking in. But as any fan of any club, you want to see your club go as far as you possibly can. But as a fan, what would you define as success for Accrington Stanley? Is it where you are currently, or do you think you could maybe go a bit further?
Well, at the beginning of each season, I think Accrington Stanley fans, first and foremost, want to see survival. And then within the first month or so, when the team Coleman is put together, then the expectations change. And I think when it got to around Christmas, over the Christmas period of time, I think people thought we had a legitimate chance at that point to maybe make a run at the playoffs. But we're happy to be in League One. Let's be honest. And if we can get to the playoffs, and I think John Coleman is the type of manager that could get us to a playoffs. He's always said he's got one more promotion left in him. And I believe that. And I think the core of the team is there. And I would say next season is maybe a chance that they would want to take a run at the playoffs and to see if we could take on the big boys and make a move up to the championship. I think that would be one of the best stories in football if you could see Accrington Stanley in the championship. But we're not getting ahead of ourselves. I think, if we can finish mid-table, we're at 61 points, the highest we've ever been in League One. We're happy with that. Disappointed in some of the matches that we've lost, because with some of those results that you mentioned, we really could be knocking on the door or in the bottom part of the playoffs.
When it comes to the recent results you've just touched on there, it seems to be recently anyway, a bit of a frustrating regular occurrence for Accrington, that when you lose, say, 3 or 4 goals, you're for some reason going to lose 5 and 7. There's been a couple of 5s and 6s and 7s over the past few months. Is that got anything to do with the fact that you've got quite a young squad, and naturally sometimes a young squad, when a few goals go in, the heads can drop, or is that too simplistic?
No, because I think defensively, the back 3 or 4 that they've implemented they're not young players. I think one of the biggest impact was we lost Mark Hughes. He's just a lunch bucket type of guy. He'd fit in with Sunderland because he gets dirty, he takes his lunch bucket to work, and he just gets in and gets his job done. And him going out has really sort of made a hole in the back to some degree. I mean, others have come in and chipped in and played well, but we had that back 3 with Burgess, Hughes, and Nottingham. Nottingham just turned 32, so he's no spring chicken, but he's really playing well. Burgess is a nice player that actually is from Scotland originally, moved to Australia and come back, and now is sort of making his name at Stanley. He's under contract for a couple of years. I think one of the issues that we've had is we've had a mixture of our midfield players, and up till yesterday, we've had a real slump in the strikers. With Colby Bishop and Dion Charles really failing to find the net. I mean, I know Charles got 2 yesterday, but they were the penalties. So from open play, they really need to pick it up, to start scoring some goals. I think that's where they've dropped off too. Well, you add the defensive mistakes, and Toby Savin has played well in spots, but he's made some poor decisions. You put all those things together, and that really explains the inconsistency that we've had this season.
In terms of individual player performances, I think two players, one of them you've already pointed out, that have always impressed me when I've watched Accrington is obviously, I think one of them's a legend at Accrington, Sean McConville. Is
Yeah.
obviously the standout, a bit of an assist machine a few years ago, and he might have tailed off a little bit, but he's not getting any younger. And I've always actually been quite impressed with Kobe Bishop when he's played against us in particular. But like you say, it's not been the most prolific of seasons. And Dion Charles is on 19, but a lot of them came at the start of the season. But the goals in general, how important have they been, Dion Charles's goals? And I mean, I suppose you've sort of touched on it in a way, but start of the season, what was he like?
Well, he has improved from last season, because last season was his first year in league play, moving up from Southport, and the same could be said for Colby Bishop. And Colby went out with an injury and is not really playing up to the way he was at the beginning of the season. But those two were really out to impress and really playing well in the first half of the season. And I think they've tailed off a lot. I think when you ask them, the big difference is the length of the season and the training and moving up from non-league. That's quite an adjustment. And I think the level of play, as I said, has increased. And I think maybe they're just tailing off a bit. But the other player that I haven't mentioned that we're really missing too, that's really stepped up this year and was really playing at a high level, is Joe Pritchard, that was with Tottenham originally, and came to us last season. He is a game changer, and he's been out recently, and that if you have McConville on the one wing and Pritchard on the other, you can stretch the field wider, and we just haven't been able to do that. And I think that makes us easier to defend against.
And I think, if I'm right, Pritchard was at, like you said, from Spurs Tottenham Academy, I think, but he suffered quite a bad knee injury, if I remember this correctly, and he ended up going to Bolton, and was Bolton you got him from, I think?
Yeah, and Bolton released him, and John Coleman snapped him up really quick. The one thing with Coleman, he's got a really good eye for a player, and somebody he sees that knows it with the right in the right environment, that they'll blossom, and he's done that with several players. I think Jordan Clark is a good example of a player that's gone on from Stanley to success, and there's quite a few of players that he develops, and Caden Jackson that went to Ipswich developed him. So I mean, that's part of the business model of Stanley. If you can get a good player, give him the opportunity to play, prove himself, and if the club has to sell him, then so be it, because that's the nature of a club like Stanley.
You talked about Jordan Clark before, and I think he's probably the perfect model for showcasing someone that John Coleman's brought in, developed into a player. But he obviously started at Barnsley, then went to Shrewsbury. But then, when you look through your squad, we mentioned before about Dion Charles coming from Southport. Now, I think I know my football. I don't know what division Southport are in. But then look at Colby Bishop, and he came from Leamington Spa. So it's a good model to have. And obviously, John Coleman has an eye for a good player, but for a club that's that small, you're not going to be able to have a massive recruitment. But it seems like everyone that he brings in, and I'm sure you'll correct me on this, but 90% of the players that he brings in from super lower levels into a division that's not the lowest league division, it's the second lowest, it's League One. He seems to consistently find these players that just work in the lower league, in the League One, from lower league. How is he so consistent with it?
Well, he not only recognizes talent that's maybe below the surface, but he's also a really good judge of character and the player's attitude. And every player that comes in, positive things to say in the way of the setup at Accrington, because even with it's a small club, they just like the environment that they're put into and the trust that the manager gives them. And he has patience with them. If they don't have a good game, he'll put them back in. He's not afraid to bring in players, but the players have to prove themselves on the training ground, and then he'll give them a chance. And as I said, that's what he's doing with Bishop and with Charles. And Charles could be a target for some bigger teams in the offseason. He's got pace. He knows where the goals, the nets are, and he really gets in between the lanes. And I think some of the times we've had problems feeding him the ball because he can create a lot of trouble for the center half because of his pace and getting in between the lanes.
He's also starting to develop a few young players coming through as well. I noticed the goalkeeper that he plays only 19, but although he went through other youth groups, I think he eventually came to Accrington Stanley sort of youth development and then has got into the first team of the squad and played 20, 30 games. So he's starting to develop players as well, isn't he?
Yeah, Toby Savin has got potential. He just needs some experience and in his decision-making process because he certainly can make the saves. He's done that with Ross Sykes that has come up through the academy after some of these players have left the teams like Burnley or other academies, 15, 16, and then Coleman has brought them in. And there's a lot of good things going on in Accrington's academy because they see players like Toby and Savin and Ross Sykes getting the opportunity to play in a team. And therefore, we're signing more players in the academy than we have in the past, which again is a vital part of the reason or the success that Stanley will have if going forward is developing good players. And if they're good, to play for Stanley and they improve, maybe they sold on and, as I said, get the money towards the club. But it's the academy doesn't get enough credit, and they are developing players, and I think you'll see more of them breaking into the team in the next 2 or 3 years.
You talked about Ross Sykes before, and I mentioned players that had impressed me when I'd seen Accrington, and Ross Sykes I didn't mention, but he actually has really impressed me when he's played. But I think the reason I've probably gone over that is I noticed he hasn't been in the team the past few weeks. Is that because he's injured currently?
Yeah, he's out for the season, and we've got Mark Hughes out for the season, Nathan Baxter. We don't know when Joe Pritchard will be back. I think he's had a reset because he was on the bench a couple of games ago, and now he's back out again. You've got some key players out, and we've had a couple of players drop off form a bit. We were lucky to get to sign Matt Butcher, and he was previously of Bournemouth.
Bournemouth, yeah.
I think when you have him in the midfield and with a healthy Pritchard, you've got two players that can not only play the midfield but can control it. And I think having Paul Smith in behind when they play the two strikers, put Paul Smith in behind them, that can create problems because John Coleman has allowed him to play across the field. He's not just plays in sort of a support role. He can pop up on the left, on the right, and then the midfield adjusts accordingly because they play in a diamond formation at times, and when Smith moves around, the diamond can change to adapt where Paul Smith is going to be on the pitch. But yeah, we've got some really talented players, and I think if they can keep the team together next year with the right additions, I don't see a reason why we can't, improve on this season.
Talked about Paul Smith there before, and I think a lot of Sunderland fans will remember his performance on I think it was a Friday night we played each other live on Sky, yeah. And obviously he got the second. I think he's about 5'2", and he got the header, which is again very, very Sunderland, but very fast player, very tricky player. He was on loan at Stanley at the time. I think he was coming from QPR. He's came back. He's obviously, I think he scored about three or five goals, I think, but he hasn't played regularly.
No, he's had a knock as well, and he's. I think he was rested on the other day because I'm not. I can't confirm this, but I suspect that John Coleman wanted him to be healthy to play against you guys because of the fact he has played well, and the match you mentioned. When we interviewed him, he said one of the thrills was being able to watch the goal and his backflip on the scoreboard, and he really enjoyed the playing in your stadium. And I think he will be up for the game, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see him back in the lineup on Saturday.
Yeah, very good player, actually. Kind of one of those players that sort of goes under the radar. I think he's played for Northern Ireland since that game. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty certain before I get into it.
It was Dion Charles got selected over the international break, and he actually got in an appearance for Northern Ireland. And I think he came back and he struggled a little bit because there was a comment made by the Northern Ireland manager that really didn't sit well with me, because he said when he came to the international squad, and he's only there for a week or so, but then he said, we brought him in, he was rough, and when he's gone back, we made him a better player, which I think was a bit harsh on what John Coleman has achieved with him. You have him for a few days, you can train with and see what he's got, but to sort of take credit that he was a better player really didn't sit with me, especially, as I said, with what John Coleman has done. But I thought that was not giving Dion Charles and John Coleman enough credit for, because he got selected for a reason.
Yeah.
No, he's hopefully he'll be back in the squad.
Now, talking about obviously our team, which occasionally is a nice thing to speak about, sometimes not always. It's always quite interesting from the outside looking in to see which players kind of really are the ones opposition fans notice. Now, obviously, Aidan McGeady's a big one, but I think there's a strong chance he could be out on Saturday with a severely bruised foot by the sounds of it. But from the outside looking in, I imagine, I haven't had much of a chance to watch Accrington this season outside of our game. I'll catch the highlights, but there's only so much you can make from that. But from what you've seen of Sunderland, which are the players that you've been impressed with and which ones concern you the most?
Well, the two players that I like that I would sort of, and I think it's always a good test if you'd say, would you have them on your team?
Yeah.
And two players that I would, that I think give Stanley trouble is your center forward, White. I think he always seems to be, he gives our central defenders a tough time, and I think he's a really good player, and he's somebody we'd have to shut down if we want a result in this match. But the other player too, and I hope I get his name right, but Luke O'Nien.
Yeah, correct. 100%.
Yeah, I like him. I just like his energy. He seems to crop up all over the pitch, and I like him. I'd probably take him first because of his work ethic, and he's a talented player. And those are the two players that I sort of look out for that are quality players that I'd love to out Stanley.
It's funny you mentioned about Luke O'Nien appearing all across the pitch. I think that's mainly his fault for being able to play centre half, right back, left back, central midfield, and probably in the 10. He hasn't played in goal yet, but I'm sure he's getting around to it. He's Sunderland fans listening to that will say that's because he plays everywhere on the pitch. I don't think he's got a settled position yet, but yeah, I don't think there's many Sunderland fans that would disagree with you on that, to be honest. Now, coming up to the match on Saturday, I imagine, I remember the Accrington fans that came up last time. There was a few on the Friday night. Sadly, I don't think from memory we got played each other last season. So in the 3 seasons we've been down there, Accrington fans have only really had the one chance to come to the Stadium Light. And I suppose it's one of the bigger grounds that they've been to. And when they were speaking to me in not the most arrogant way, they were saying, it's a great away day because of the size of the stadium and things like that. Sadly, you've been sort of robbed of that. But I remember that game with 2-2, and I remember you took a 2-0 lead, and then I remember when we got one back, it was actually one of the best atmospheres in the Stadium Light for seasons. And we really got behind the team, and it really felt like we were going to push on and get 3-2. And I think it was Chris Maguire's free kick got cleared off the line. And I remember vividly, like, Accrington's players somehow sort of wilting a little bit as our crowd kind of got up. So can that benefit you this week, the fact that, you can go out and play your game, not worry about the crowd, not worry about the stadium that you're playing in because no one's there? Could that benefit you more than if there was maybe fans there?
That's a good point. And I think really now that we've been in League One for 2 or 3 seasons, I think the attitude of being, or the feeling of being in awe of other teams and going to a stadium like yourselves, the Stadium of Light, I think that is gone from them. I think now they go in there with the attitude that really they can beat anybody. And I think they've proved that this year, not only in the past, is that they beat the top teams. And I mean, when we first got into League One and we see teams like Sunderland come into the Wembley Stadium, Ipswich, Portsmouth, we're going, wow, this is a previous Premier League team playing against Accrington. I think we've got past that in awe, and not that we feel we're entitled to be in League One, but we appreciate the fact that we are. But we don't fear any teams anymore, and I think that's the same for Sunderland, and especially I think we seem to get up a little more, as I mentioned before, against teams in the top half. I mean, we've got an horrendous run in if we want to get sort of in the top 10, because we've got Portsmouth twice, Charlton Athletic, and you guys. I mean, it's a good job we're not fighting for a playoff spot, because that would be an awful run-in. But I'm hoping that we can get some results enough that we can maybe sneak into the top 10.
Yeah, I mean, you're right in what you're saying. I'm talking about, that game where I felt like your players wilted, but at the same time, you went 2-0 up in the first sort of 50 minutes. So ignore everything I said, because you actually obviously almost won that game. It's just my abiding memory from it. But final question, as always, I've managed to get 2 predictions right in 3 weeks, which I went, I think, almost 7 months without getting one prediction right. So maybe I'm on a roll. So I better go with a Sunderland win. So I'll say I think it'll be a nervy game, because where we need a win, I think we will get one. I'm going to go with 1-0, a nice, second half goal, maybe clean sheet. But if you were to make a prediction, what are you going for on Saturday?
Well, I'm hoping your form stays intact and that you don't get a win. But I'm a lot of away fans will pick their team to win, and I think
Sure.
Stanley fans are a little more realistic. But I think we'll see another 2-2 draw, and I think we'll see Colby Bishop and Dion Charles come out of their slump and score an open play.
I sincerely hope, from a Sunderland perspective, that's not the case, but I do thank you for coming on, Tony, nonetheless. Really great chatting to you. I absolutely commend your commitment to travelling that far. I don't know if I could do it, and that's me just being honest, but lovely chatting. Obviously, Sony knows an awful lot about their club, and I hope you've enjoyed yourself as well.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed it. It's nice to be able to answer the questions on a podcast as opposed to prepare the questions for the interviewee. So no, you've been a great host, and I appreciate allowing myself to be on your podcast. And I mean, it's when you're talking to on a podcast about Sunderland. And you're an Accrington Stanley fan, it's you got to pinch yourself and say, yeah, we're really doing this. And as I say, it's been a lot of fun, and thanks for having me.
Well, I think we're going to be here for another 50 years because we can't seem to get out of it, so we might do a few more yet.
Well, I have in my preseason picks, I had you guys winning the playoff championship there, so I believe you'll get promoted through winning the playoffs.
I'll invite you back on if we do.
Okay, sounds like a plan. Okay, cheers, Graham.